everyone to this session of Financial Foundations, our webinar that we put on quarterly. And we are just really thankful for each of you. We're blessed to have all of you join us tonight, and we're glad to have you along with us. I am Sheri Meister, and here with...
And I'm Jeff Pospisil. I serve as the treasurer for the foundations as well as the conference treasurer for the Dakotas Conference. So,
right, and I suppose I should let everybody know who I am too, Jeff. I'm the director for the foundations for both the Dakotas and Minnesota. And like I said, it's a pleasure to be here with you this evening. I think we'll get right started, Jeff, and start with the PowerPoint. For those of you who are new to our webinars, we try to keep them right around 30, 35, 40 minutes, somewhere in there. So we're hoping that we can give you a peek into some different ways of thinking about your finances and opportunities and how your money can be turned into ministry. So we'll get started with our PowerPoint.
And if you do want to interact with us, the best way to do it is through the chat function. So if you got a question, you got something you want to say, now that I know we can actually unmute people, I may even do that if that happens. So we'll see. That was the first time I ever did that. So.
All right, so as we're going to get started this evening, and we introduced ourselves, and we also want you to know that we are here as a resource and beyond the webinar. And if you have questions or if we can help you in any way in your churches and the ministries that you're providing through the resources and finances, do not hesitate to reach out to either one of us. Tonight, we're going to talk about telling your church story and building relationships, which we find goes hand in hand. And for each of you, think about for a minute, what is your church story? What is your church about in your communities? And what are some of the special things that you do that maybe some of the other churches or other ministries are not providing in your communities? And
can we do our polling question?
Oh, sure.
So part of the reason why I think this is so important, you might think, well, knowing our church story, why is that important? We're in the nomination season, right? So a lot of us are doing our charge conferences. We've had to ask people to serve on our committees, which is similar to asking people to give money as well as give time. So we have a polling question for you with that in mind. What best describes what it feels like when you ask someone to serve on a church committee? Do you feel like a dentist who ran out of Novocaine? Do you feel like an employer letting someone know that they just got the job? Do you feel like a used car salesman trying to unload a lemon? Or do you feel like a telemarketer calling somebody at 7 p.m. when they're trying to hold a webinar, or eat dinner with their family? And we're seeing quite a few people saying they feel like a telemarketer. Almost, and I know most of these ones were negative. We realize that, but yeah, we'll leave it open for a little bit. But so the thought would be is, what if it felt good, like you were giving somebody a job opportunity or a dream job whenever you ask them to serve or to give? So, and that I think is what what Sheri's message will be about, is how do you get to that place where you're excited? Let's go ahead and end the poll and share the results. So now you can see the majority of people, 75% or 3/4 of them feel like, yeah, you're unloading a lemon. You are the telemarketer on the other side, versus the minority of you see it as an opportunity for them, that you're providing them a real opportunity. So
I think, Jeff, that sometimes, and we talked about this earlier, about that some things that seem so natural and obvious to some of us. It's not that way to everyone in the church. And how does everyone feel about your church? And if you're in those situations, how are you telling the story of your church so that everybody understands it? And as Jeff said, wants to be a part of it. I think sometimes we as leaders make assumptions that just because we feel it's a great place to be, we assume everybody wants to be here, and we forget that messaging. And in the days of you should be part of the church because we're the church, they no longer exist. And so having to tell that story among the people within your congregation and outside in your community, and then even reminding ourselves once in a while, who are we, and what is our role in the community or in the positions that we hold. As a church, what do you do best? I mean, do you serve the community as like a soup kitchen? Do you have great Bible studies? Do you have a great youth program? Are you taking your message outside the walls of the church? Are you welcoming and friendly when people enter the church? These are all questions that you and your leadership team should have so that you know who you are and what you do best. When talking about your church to others, are you really excited about something and you draw people in and you want them to be a part of that too? And how are you sharing what's going on in the church? And what is it that is enticing others to your church? And what would bring someone to your church who's not a member? Are you in the youth group, or other individuals in the youth group bringing people along too so that they're also a part of your church? What are some of the things that you're doing? And these are great questions to be asking you as leadership, your leadership committees. Once you are excited about your church, the ministries that are going on there, your story, who you are, you're great with youth, you've got some really strong Bible studies, you are working in the community as a church, you are bringing worship to another area in your community, any of those exciting pieces, is everyone in the church excited about those and talking about those as well? So that, as Jeff said, you're creating a place for people who want to be a part of your organization or your church.
Sheri, also, I mean, I'm just trying to think where people are still coming back to church, and in different places it's different. What would make even your members want to say, okay, I think I've been missing out. What have I been missing out on in church? You know, what would be the buzz? You know, this is what we're experiencing. This is what we're seeing because of our involvement with the church.
Right, Jeff, that's we so often hear, and this is where it's gotten a little bit tricky during the pandemic, because church isn't in the building. We've all said that for many years, but now it's even more so because it's online. And are the people not coming back because you've done a really great job as a church to give a worship experience online? A couple of us in the foundation had this conversation last week, that I know one gal that really doesn't have any interest in going back, still wants to be a member, wants to be involved in other things, but worship on Sunday morning, she is finally finding just what she needs by worshiping in the mornings online. And one of the other people that we were talking about said, I can't do that. Worship to me is being connected and being with other people in the church. And I think for years we made some assumptions that was what we needed to do all the time and make sure people were in the buildings. But how are we meeting people where they are and not making some of those assumptions that is for everybody? Because not everybody gets the same experience at the same times. And I think that brings us to the church culture. What is your culture? Are you friendly when you greet people and when you bring them into the church, and is it warm and welcoming? We make a lot of church visits throughout the year, and there is a definite personality from church to church. We can't ever make assumptions when Well, I take that back because I have made assumptions when I walk in. This is the experience that I'm thinking I'll have. And we can either be really surprised or sometimes a little bit disappointed because it's not quite what we thought it was going to be, because it wasn't as warm and welcoming as we had hoped.
Can I share a
Yep,
quick story? So
sure.
I remember when I was working with Rapid City First, and I have this idea of a first church as being, we're playing the organ and it's kind of a higher church type of deal. And they were really a family church. I mean, they were totally multi-generational, very welcoming. Yes, they had the organ and excellent music, but their culture was more family oriented than it was the typical first church mindset. Hopefully I'm not offending people with that, but I mean, there is that idea of a higher church. But anyway, my expectations were totally blown away. And I even said, you guys might want to change your name. I mean, you guys, just because, and maybe it was just even my perception, but anyway, anyway, that's what when it hit for me.
And we come back after our church visits and we share these experiences that we had. And it's always fun to see when we come back excited from a church. And then there's always those times that little places you could tweak once in a while, and work with the leadership to be able to do that. But Jeff's right, Rapid City Central, we both had that same experience and feeling when we left the church, and we had gone at separate times. So it was a good feeling. But that culture, it defines who you are. I had somebody tell me one time that they had a really strong welcome center in their church and that they took pride in it. What they didn't understand in that, the people running it is that they were really, the presentation was that they had a really tidy and neat welcome center. They were keeping it tidy and they were keeping it to themselves, but they weren't really reaching out beyond the welcome center to welcome everybody. So it's everybody's perception, as Jeff said. And it defines who you are. And people who attend will have that same feel. And think about it as you visit other people in their homes. Each one of those has a culture and a different personality as well. And it's the same thing at the church. And it's never neutral. It's never, well, it's a little bit friendly or a little bit unfriendly, or it's got a lot of programs or it doesn't have any programs. It's never really neutral. It's either really opportunities there or things seem pretty limiting. And when, in my world, I'm always looking at how generous the churches are and the people the people in the pews, and it's never status quo. There's either a generosity feel or there's some churches that are a little less generous. And I can usually sense that immediately when I walk in, and people have asked me how I can do that. And I don't really have a formula. I'm just able to sense that, and other people coming into your church will do that as well. And again, some of this is a little bit repetition, and some of you have probably heard me say some of these things before, but I think they're good reminders as we fit it in, and as we develop those relationships to help people know and have a better understanding of your church. Does everyone know what you're doing as a church that will appeal to the members, but also the outside community? Are they saying, well, we're going to pick on Kyle here tonight just because we know Kyle and the church. So when I say that, does everybody know what Harrisburg UMC is doing when they have something special going on and in the community? Are you making those things known, and are the people in your church excited about it? Is all of your leadership team on board with who you are as a church? Jeff, I'm gonna let you go here while I grab a drink. Whoops.
All right. I'll fill in here for a little bit. Gosh, and I was chatting with Marty Tepke Floyd on the side, by the way, because he was Marty was asking about, he'd never heard about that first church mentality before. But and it's interesting how little things like that could be a hang up. I was telling him about how I brought a friend of mine to Sioux Falls First, and again they were blown away by the ministry of Sioux Falls First. But the historic nature of the building and the name was one of their hangups. So sorry, that's what I was talking about. But so it's interesting how a person could take their story, their historic legacy. So part of my story is, and I see Jeremy Skoglund's online. He's from Bismarck, Bismarck Legacy. That used to be my church. Part of what we did is we tried to capture our own legacy and bring that forward to guide our current ministry. So part of our own legacy was we helped launch the Christian school in Bismarck. We helped launch one of the hospitals in Bismarck. And so we had this DNA of doing great things for the community. And how did we want to recapture that? And one of the ways they did that was Christmas, It's Not Your Birthday, where they give your offering, where they give their offering away to community need. And it was just one of those ideas about they knew their story and their legacy, and then they were able to bring it forward and guide how they wanted to act going forward. And it really did create a buzz, but it was really that whole idea of embracing that legacy and how do you make it translate it into the future to guide you in your future. All right. So, are you all right, Sheri?
No, Jeff, sorry. I don't know this. It's that season, the allergy season, and
Yeah.
I got a little tickle there, and so I text my family to see if they can bring me something for this. So anyway, I apologize, everyone. And Jeff, this is your slide to speak to anyway, but you must understand where you are financially as a church, because if you're not in good financial standings, it will be really, and people aren't aware at where you're at, it will be really difficult for you to be able to tell that story and reach out and let everyone else be aware of it too. So
because one thing we used to always reinforce was that there's three things needed to encourage generous giving. One is a compelling mission, which is your story. I mean, it's something that you see produced consistently throughout your church. What is your story? The second thing is a financial soundness, so that people that are going to give, they can trust that you're going to care for their money. And so actually the next webinar we're going to do, and it's in February, it's called Investigating Your Balance Sheet. And it's going to be walking through your balance sheet, so we have an understanding of your balance sheet, but then also being able to make decisions that will guide especially how you invest your money. Because I have the privilege of being able to see a lot of church balance sheets, and it's interesting because until you start asking questions, a lot of people just don't know. And I think partially, if I'm a giver to your church, I want to know that you're not only using my money well, but maybe even multiplying my money. And I love that idea. And then the third one, by the way, is regard for leadership. So your story, you're handling your finances well, and then they have a high regard for the leadership as well. So,
right. Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah.
Again, everyone, I apologize. Get that tickle, and it's hard to get rid of that.
Kyle has his hand up. Yeah, Kyle. I just unmuted him. Maybe. No, I didn't. Okay.
I was just from the beginning of the seminar.
Oh, then I'm going to put your hand down and remove your permission to talk.
So the mission and vision of your church are so important too. And I know some people really bypass this. They think it's a waste of time. They find it confining sometimes. They find it difficult to to do in your church with trying to get everybody on the same page. But it is really beneficial to take a concentrated amount of time, maybe a full day, maybe a retreat, to find your mission and your vision. And are you able to articulate that church mission? The one thing that is really important is that everything that you do with your church or for your church or with the people of your church, that it comes back to that mission and that you stay on track for that, to be able to, again, tell your story of who you are and what you're doing.
We do have
And
another polling question too.
Yeah, Kelsey, you can get that ready. The mission statement isn't that you want everybody to recite it. It's more of the values of who you are, and not to stray off of that into some other pet project and some of those other things that people can derail what your church is trying to be and who you are. Kelsey, do you have the next polling?
All right, the poll number 2, concerning your mission and vision, how crucial are they to your everyday church ministry? It's something that we just checked off the list. We've done it. We've never done one, or we look back at it every now and then and I put in this feel guilty about not following through, or do we use it actually to guide our mission and ministry? So a number of people are voting, and quite a few are actually saying this is valuable to our church's mission and ministry. This is our guide. All right, let's go ahead and end that poll and share the results. And you can see, there's a number of us. I think we've all been there. We checked it off. And eventually we do get it to a place where it guides our ministry. One of our churches, they feel guilty about it, and a couple have never done it. So that's, but it is encouraging to see that 70% of people do use it as a guide for their ministry and mission.
Right. Jeff, I'm really impressed with those numbers. So that's wonderful. So is staying with that, that's the first step of telling your story of who you are. And then your vision of your church. Is it clear and compelling? Do you know your church's core values? And are you, as the pastor, is your vision aligned with the church leadership vision? The ones we see that can derail the fastest is when the pastor and the leadership have two different visions and hopes for the church. And that goes back to maybe having a retreat or some time together to strategize and see just what direction and where you should be going. There's not a success story when the church and the pastor are on two different paths.
And what happens sometimes is what we'll see is that a pastor will have a strong vision for the church, but the church laity don't take ownership of it. And really, Randy Hedge is the one that really drilled this into me, pastor formerly of Madison United Methodist Church. But he would say, unless they create it, they won't support it. Unless they create it, they won't support it. And maybe you hope for that alignment, but we've seen it a number of times where a pastor will try to infuse their vision into the church, and as soon as the pastor leaves, so does that vision. So
so then cultivating that culture and communicating those core values. To communicate those, it should go in all messaging in whatever committee you're working on. Sometimes we see that it's not expressed in the finance. If it is expressed in the finance, then it's a easier understanding how the budget lines up with the missions and the goals of your church. I think we forgot part of the wording on the challenge. Challenge the people with a clear understanding and knowing what that means. And like I said, every single committee should be on board with that church vision and that church mission. And then have generosity. If it's volunteer generosity, if it's resource generosity, if it's a combination of the two, have generosity at the forefront of every church decision, so that each person and each committee then is responsible for generating resources. And it doesn't lie just in the finance or just in the trustees or just in the foundation, if some of your churches have the foundation, but it's a partner in a parallel vision for each one of those committees to have that generosity and resources available. And then developing relationships. This is my favorite part of my job. For those of you who do know who I am, I think that you would agree that this is what I like to do. And I love to find out about people. So in your churches, do your research, know who you are approaching, know who you are going to be visiting with. And when you get to the person to visit with them, go with an open heart and an open ear to hear about the person and who they are. We had an incident happen one time where some materials were developed to talk about the future generations and the possibilities for these people's these individuals, for their family of generations to come. The person that had developed the materials was not aware that this individual that we were going to approach didn't have any children. And so thank goodness we intercepted that. And then we could talk about, she was very, very, very interested in children and the future of kids. But we wrote the letter in a different way, so they didn't approach her as if it was her children. It's just so important to know the people, know where they're coming from, and know their interests. And then how do those interests and the values and the families that they have and the friends that they have, how do those connect to your church? What are their interests outside of the church and in the church?
I was just listening to somebody, I think it was even today. I'm part of the nonprofit church leaders program through Dakota Wesleyan University, and our speaker today was talking about, especially when you're visiting with people, you want to pay attention what their giving and their service could do for them as an individual, not what you can get from them. So you want your focus is on what it can do for them, how it will make them better off, rather than what are they going to sacrifice, focusing on their sacrifice. So it was an interesting take, because, and most of us, I would guess almost all of us on this webinar here would say that we have been blessed in ways we could not even have imagined going into it, because of our giving and our service in the church world.
Take time for a cup of coffee or a lunch. That is my favorite. I love to sit down with a cup of coffee to learn about somebody else and to understand where they're coming from, as I talked to before, but to meet them where they are, to have coffee, or if they don't drink coffee, have a soda with them or something, but to get to know this person. In our home church, Randy and I, there's 3 individuals that are elderly in our church that are very important to us. And we had kept saying, we want to go visit these people regularly. Well, through the church, they've got a visiting program, and we signed up, but we're going for ourselves. The church having this visitation program to help connect kind of kicked us in gear to get this going. So we spent one Saturday visiting all three of these individuals. And I can tell you that it was way more valuable, those visits to us, and to hear about them and to reconnect with them and see how their kids are doing and all of these things. It was just as much of value to us as it was to the people that we were visiting. And it was probably one of my favorite days that I've had in a long time. It was a great day. And then listen and listen, and not try to fill the air with your stories, but to hear about the people. And that sounds so common sense, or it sounds so practical, but you'd be surprised how many people go to the table and then talk about themselves. And it's just a reminder that when you're developing the relationships, you're there to learn about them and have that enriched opportunity for you as well as for them. As you're developing those relationships, you're also recognizing their spiritual gifts. And, you know, much of my teaching and my work is done on generosity and asking donors for gifts and connecting people with resources and connecting resources with the programs that we are working on. And one of the things that really kicked into me is that the gift of generosity is something just like the gift of volunteer hospitality. People have gifts and resources, and they've been blessed with money. And so how do you connect those resources with what is happening in your church and the possibilities of strengthening ministry because of the resources that are available by somebody who has that spiritual gift of generosity? And this is a moves management tool, and you want somebody who is very involved in your church, but that also has some capacity to be able to give some resources. And that's where, right where the cross is on this diagram, to show that these are the people that, if they have the resources, they are the ones that might give more money and have the capability to give bigger donations to your church. And then it's just a matter of connecting the dots. You find the person who has the resources, the time, they have the ability to help with some of your programming, and you've learned about these people, and you know what needs to be done in your church, and you connect the dots to make that happen. And then make the connection. And this is just another way to do it. But once you learn about that person and you go to coffee again, or you meet up with them again, and you say, you know, I know you've got a real heart for our children's ministry. It's always the easiest one to do is the children's ministry. Here are some ways our church is working in this area. Would you be interested in learning more? And then connecting those individuals with the ministries and the programs of your church. You know, some of our people within our church have real skills in teaching, and they would be a great person to connect to a Bible study, or to try something new in a new topic within your church that is laying on their heart and that they would be willing to share.
You know, Sheri, can I chime in? One of my pet peeves is always when people, they ask you to serve and they say, oh, it's not much work, you know, it's really something anybody could do, that kind of thing. And I always think, well, then why do I want to do it? You know, but really, I mean, when you're asking somebody, you know, you seem like a person, like you said, children's ministry, you seem like a person that really loves to work with kids. Would you consider volunteering in our kids? I know it's a demanding thing, but it is worth it. You know, when you see the kids learning about Christ and forming relationships with older Christians or something like that. I don't know, whatever it is. But I would rather have them sell me it like this is something very important. And it is going to take a sacrifice, because no matter what, even when they downplay it, this is not going to take any time or anything else, whatever. It always takes time. So, and it's always something, but I'd rather them, I wouldn't pour my life out for something that's not worth it. So.
Marty, I see that I was looking at the chat while Jeff was explaining that a little bit, and COVID has made it more difficult with building relationships, but there's still ways to be able to do that. And like you said, the telephone connecting, now that they're loosening up a little bit of the recommendations and things for COVID, you know, you could bring them in for, we've been in a few meetings in the churches and sitting far apart, but you can still learn about the different people around the table. So there are still new ways, creative ways, but making that contact, sending a note. Jeff and I talked about how special it still is to get a note in the mail and somebody that just says thank you, or we appreciated you being with us, or any note is still probably one of the best responses that you can get from somebody today. And I think it's because we recognize what an effort people make when they write a handwritten note, because you know it's a lot easier to write an email or to text someone, but that handwritten note is so important. Were there any other chats? Does anybody else have any questions? This is kind of a shorter webinar this time, but the other piece that is so important in all that we do is find time for prayer, and pray for the people that you visited, pray for the ministries within your church, and pray for those connections. Pray that their hearts are open to trying something new, that their hearts are available for you with the ministries that you have within your churches. And pray for that story. What is making your church stand out from the other churches, is strong in your community? Take time for the prayer. It's such an important piece.
Stand out from the bar, or stand out from hockey, or whatever it is. All those other things. There's a lot of things that compete, and people think, well, yeah, if my kid plays hockey every Sunday, that'll change his life. Well, probably will, but is it the way you want it? Anyway, nothing bad about hockey. I just never played it, so.
Yeah. So, and we want to say thank you. Thank you for participating. Thank you for all you do in your churches. Thank you for bringing ministry to your communities. And as I said at the beginning, we are here for you, and we're here to help you in any of the ways that we can. And if it's not in our wheelhouse, we'll try to find somebody who is available and can make those connections for you. So thank you, everybody. Jeff, you want to plug
Yeah,
next webinar?
I'll just repeat real quick. Next time it's going to be a little bit more on the financial, practical side, that part of it. And we're going to be looking at church balance sheets, some actual church balance sheets, and making sure we understand them, and then also being able to make decisions on it, because a lot of times that is one of those things. A bit balance sheet or a statement of financial position is one you kind of look at and just turn the page. Oh, yep, there's money in the bank, good, boom. But there are important things we could learn from that, and it could help guide us in how we make decisions. So, all right,